Welcome to the Reviews Without Remorse podcast with Joe and Dave. Be warned, the discussions in this podcast may contain detailed spoilers. For spoiler-free reviews, be sure to check out our show on YouTube. Enter at your own risk and enjoy the show.
We didn't make Rambo 3 a subpar action film. We just chipped away the rough pieces. I am Joe, a one-man war machine, and my partner is Dave, and I'm here because he'd do it for me. And this is episode 136, and in this episode, new trailers for Dr. Sleep and The Lighthouse, Dave and I will discuss. And then, the oddly titled Rambo 3 gets a review. Dave and I look at Rambo 3. What's up, partner?
Not much. This is going to be a fun one, I think. Because, I'm kind of all over the place with this one.
Same here. And I kind of like it when there's a genuine dissection and a genuine mystery to unravel, which I feel like this is, at least for me.
Okay, good. We're relatively on the same page. Sometimes those can be boring, but sometimes they could also lead to great discussions. I'm hoping this is the latter.
When I was a kid, there was a place. A dark place. They closed it down and let it rot. But the things that lived there...
Hello, Danny.
they come back.
Okay, I'm just going to say it. I am both excited and nervous by this movie. I loved this novel. I really, really loved this novel. I went into the Dr. Sleep novel with a big chip on my shoulder. You know, Stephen King had never really written a sequel before. He had, made references in his books to other books before, but a full-on sequel was something he had never actually written. So I went into the book with a chip on my shoulder, and I was actually very pleased with where he went with it. He made it its own. He did it as a character study of what would happen to Danny Torrance after the whole incident at the Overlook. And I found it to be a fascinating story. I enjoyed it. I was surprised by it, and I was satisfied with it. Now, the movie, I'm kind of torn on, because on the one hand, it looks like they're being faithful to the book, but they're also kind of making it a sequel to Kubrick's Shining, and that just kind of feels like a large amount of hubris. I think I've mentioned this the last time we talked about the trailer.
Yeah.
The fact that it is so beholden to the original, and I can't blame them. I mean, you can't really do a sequel to The Shining and not have it reference the original movie. And it is. And I kind of feel like that's going to be... I think that's going to turn off audiences because it is a completely different story than the original. That said, I like the way it looks. I like the fact that, they've recreated the look of the Overlook. I think that looks great. They're doing it a little bit differently with the things of the Overlook that are haunting him. In the book, it was the owner of the hotel as well as the woman in the bathtub that was haunting him. It seems like here they're focusing more on the twin girls. But I like the look of Rebecca Ferguson's Rose the Hat. I like the menace that she's bringing to it. There's a lot I like about it, but I'm just cautious with this movie. I'm not really 100% sold that it's going to work.
Yeah, I will say that I thought this trailer looked a little bit better than the first one. The first one, I honestly took one look and I just said I have no interest in this. And I really can't say I have any interest in it yet. One or two things popped to mind. I heard that Stephen King likes the script. Which might mean absolutely nothing. Maybe it just means he's got a stake in it and he has to say nice things about it. On the other hand, it could mean that he looks at this as kind of a retcon of the original film. As you noted, the film departs from the book greatly. King was not a big fan of the original, so maybe he thinks by tying his novel in with that film does a little retconning, and maybe he'll feel a little bit better about it. That said, I'm not sure. I took a look at this director to see what he had done before. The only thing that he's done that I've heard good things about The Haunting of Hill House. Haven't seen it.
The TV show is excellent.
Yeah,
it's a really good show.
Heard good things. So that's the thing. I saw something he did called Hush, which was a woman who is, I think she was deaf and a mute, and she's in the little house, and there are intruders outside, and things ensue. And it was a competent horror film, I suppose, horror thriller. I'd give it a kind of a B- sort of thing, decent. So yeah, I don't know. Just color me lukewarm on this one. If I hear good, I would like to be pleasantly surprised by this one. I'm a huge fan of the original Shining, Kubrick's Shining. So there you go. If it can kind of pay homage to that first one, do some new things. Oh, by the way, there was a moment in this trailer though that kind of made me kind of go, I'm not positive how this plays out. But there was a line in the trailer, something about they kill people like us, or they're out to hunt people like us, and my mind immediately went to Glass, and I kind of went, no. If that's what this is going to be, no, not interested.
It's a little deeper than that, but I can understand your apprehension.
So,
and it looks like they are following it from how it is in the books. So
okay, so fingers crossed. We'll see what happens. Color my interest tepid at best.
What made your last keeper leave?
He believed that there was some enchantment in the light. Went mad, he did. Tall tales. What?
Have you seen The Witch?
I did. Yes, I certainly did.
And if I remember correctly, I remember you mentioning it. I remember it's a movie that you enjoyed.
I enjoyed it very much so. In fact, I believe after we did, it was several months after we did our top 10 for the year, whichever year this was, I remember going back later, and once I had seen it, I believe I said that I would have put it on my top 10 if I saw it in time, or maybe it was a runner-up. I can't remember. It was one of those two. But I definitely thought it was one of the best things I'd seen that year, for sure.
I gotta tell you, I love the look of the Lighthouse. I love the black and white, like 50s Hammer horror movie style look of this movie.
Yes.
And I love the depth, and for God's sakes, like 10 to 15 seconds of the trailer is Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson basically just saying what back and forth to each other. And I'm like, I want to see this. I want to see this. I like the look of this. There's something intriguing about the idea of it. The little snippets that it showed. I found this to be a very effective trailer for 1 minute and 30 seconds. It teased but didn't give anything away. And I kind of liked the chemistry that in the short time that they showed the two characters, there was some great chemistry between Pattinson and Dafoe. So, and you add that to your high praise of The Witch, which I mean to watch, and I'm going to watch as soon as possible. This is now on my list. I want to see this movie. I liked this trailer. I thought it was haunting. I thought it was beautifully creepy. I don't know if they actually shot in black and white, but if they didn't, and if this was like a color degradation that they did an excellent job of making it look like it. But I will bet my dollars to donuts that this was shot in black and white. And did you notice the aspect ratio too? How it's very, very in line with 50s style movies as well.
I did not know, but that's an interesting.
When you look at it, instead of it being like a widescreen thing, it's more of a square instead of like widescreen, instead of like a rectangle. That because in movies originally movies at the time in the 50s mostly were very square. It's interesting. I like the look of it. I like the idea of it, and I'm on board.
There was a movie that was out probably in the last 2 years, and I believe it was called Ghost Story.
Okay.
Excellent film. Very kind of I wouldn't even want to try to explain it. It's kind of it's just a thinker, but they shot it in like a kind of a squarish ratio, and even the corners of the film were curled as if you were looking at one of those like photos from like the 70s they used to get. They used to kind of cut them with the little curls on the edges, whatever. They would curve the edges rather. And it was a great film. And I'm telling you, anything I see, whenever I see that A24 logo, I'm really kind of like, ooh, what's next? Because I'm telling you, they really do great stuff. Again, the last few top 10s I've had, and I'm not a horror guy, only because it's so hard to get a really good horror movie. I mean, there's just, for every 10 schlocky, junky movies, there's one kind of diamond in the rough. So yeah, I'm kind of looking at this saying this could be the next one. This could be the next really good film. And by the way, if I didn't know that was Robert Pattinson, I would not have known. So kind of props to him. I'm sort of getting into. I mean, we've talked about him being the new Batman, and I think the whole world is kind of going, oh crap. But honestly, so for that reason, I'm probably sort of watching him, kind of going, all right, well, let's see what this guy's doing. And I saw this, I'm like, I don't even think I would have known that was him. So props to him for sinking himself into that role and sort of disappearing into it. Yeah, color me curious.
Very curious, and yes, I agree. I'm actually one of the few people that do not have a problem with Pattinson as Batman, simply because I'm putting my trust in Matt Reeves in that case. One other thing I want to mention, it turns out, yes, this was filmed on 35 millimeter black and white film stock.
I'm not surprised, because when when you shoot in color and you try to turn it to black and white, you sort of, it's not as pure. So yeah. And the look of this film looks really nice. So I'm not surprised they actually went for it and shot it in black and white.
I'm very impressed. I am very much looking forward to this movie.
This mission's important, John. I want you to come with me to help me lead the team. What do you say, John?
I put in my time.
What's that mean?
It means my war's over.
He never draws first blood. He only fights back. The first time was for himself. The second time was for his country. This time,
Rambo, something went wrong.
it's for his friend.
Trumpman was a good man, and I'm really very sorry.
You're just leaving him?
What do you expect us to do? Send in a Delta team? Create an international incident?
What about me?
Rambo mounts a one-man mission to rescue his friend, Colonel Troutman, from the clutches of the formidable invading Soviet forces in Afghanistan. Written by Sylvester Stallone and Sheldon Latish, based on characters created by David Burrell, directed by Peter MacDonald, Rambo 3. And so, the First Blood title disappears forever.
Well, it's kind of sort of coming back in a way, but yeah, just on the surface, this is the most oddly numbered titled series. You got First Blood, Rambo First Blood Part 2, then just Rambo 3, then just Rambo, and now you have Rambo Last Blood. Boy, they really get, I used to always get really irked when they would put the Indiana Jones films into a box set, and they kind of reworked the logo for the original Raiders, and they kept calling it Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now, I'm a big fan of consistency too. I get that urge to be anal and kind of make them malt, but no, you don't do that. Similarly here, yeah, when I see them just drop that First Blood and call it Rambo 3, it's not Rambo 3 because the original was not called Rambo. So yeah, that does kind of irk the
grammar Nazi in you.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Couldn't have said it better myself.
This is an odd bird of a movie. It spends a good, I'd say, half hour basically idealizing the Mujahideen of Afghanistan, which, considering where they've gone, where the Mujahideen has gone to today, it doesn't really hold up as much as it used to.
Yeah. It is. Yeah, it has become sort of trivia. Like, oh, remember the good guys from Rambo 3? Yeah, guess who blew up the World Trade Center?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, well, I mean, times change, and I guess whatever.
Strange bedfellows.
Yeah.
Weirdly, I almost wish I didn't see this movie back in the day. This is actually my first viewing of the movie. And a part of me kind of wishes that I had seen it originally, because I think I probably would have felt a little bit differently. Because as they were, going through the whole thing, I'm kind of cringing. And it's not the movie's fault. The movie is a product of its time. I'm cringing with later knowledge that there's this one guy, and I was like, oh God, which one of them represents Osama bin Laden? Oh God,
It could very well be Omar Sharif in this, for all we know. Can you imagine that idea?
Oh,
yeah. Here's the thing. It's hard to separate that out. I mean, anybody who reads a newspaper and kind of looks at this and goes, oh, wait a second. Just in terms of the story, though, if you just look at it in terms of okay, they're the oppressors, here's the oppressed, let's just forget exactly who and where we are and run with that.
Which is what I did.
Yeah, I mean, it's even then, does it work? Well, we'll discuss it. But it is a strange footnote to this film.
But with that out of the way, let's get actually to it. Now, I was okay with this movie. I can't say I loved it. I could say that there were some nice little action pieces here and there, but the action has definitely... I mean, Rambo First Blood Part 2 was definitely kind of a harbinger for what this was, because the action started getting really outrageous to the point, it's like, oh, here's 50 men. Oh, I've just got an AK-47. I'm just gonna... it takes down a whole row of soldiers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And here it's times 10. It's almost like I'm starting to crack on the whole idea of the one-man army in this movie. And that's bad, because that's what Rambo is supposed to be. I mean, granted, at the end, they have the big, rescue scene with the Mujahideen and everything like that. And so it's not really him, fighting an army. But for a while there, it got a little touch and go, and the whole, outrageousness, shall we say.
Yeah. Well, you know what it is, too? The funny part of that is that it technically... it should work a little better here, because I think that in Rambo 2, they literally show troops and troops and troops of Vietnamese, plus troops and troops and troops of Russians, just swarms of people everywhere. Here, it feels to me like you're not seeing as many bodies. You're not seeing as many boots on the ground. And like you said, at the end, there's kind of the cavalry. So technically it should work better. Yet somehow it doesn't, because you're sort of seeing kind of the cracks a little bit more.
The entire ending, which was reminding me very much of, oh, look, it's the Empire versus the Ewoks. Because, here they are. They've got tanks. They've got machine guns. They've got all this heavy equipment. They have that monster of a freaking helicopter and everything like that. But here comes the guys on their horses with their AK-47s. And when the smoke clears, it's only those people that survived. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's weird. And again, that is sort of the thing about this film, is somehow it's not working. And I, for one, there are certain parts of it that are kind of, okay, I see some very clear missteps. I see what went wrong here. But why is that enough that it sort of derails the whole film for me? And I can't quite put my finger on what that is.
This is an excellent question, and one we're going to have to explore as we go through the review, because I'm in the same boat as you. I really didn't feel for this movie at all.
Yeah.
And I hate to say this, but maybe a part of it is actually Hot Shots Part 2 that's stuck in my head as I'm watching this movie. Because that is basically a parody of this.
Yes, right. It almost, right. You see more of this in that film than even Rambo 2. That's definitely part of it. I'll say, well, here we go. Let's kind of start carving it up. One thing I'll say right off of the bat, and I kind of harped on this with the last episode, James Cameron is gone. James Cameron is not doing the script. He's not doing the screenplay. So that very famous Cameron build-up, where the tension builds and builds and builds, that is obviously gone. Because what you have here is like when you watch the film, you sort of go, well, oh yeah, there's that, and oh yeah, there's that. Like all the familiar ingredients are there. And in some ways, there are moments in this film that I feel like are even better than what came prior. There are some parts where it has a majestic feel. I think the score is really good as they're sort of traveling through the desert to meet up with the Mujahideen. Very good stuff. The actors are good. I should say Omar Sharif's cameo is very good. Maybe the other one's not as much. But again, you have all the ingredients. You have good ingredients, and then yet somehow it all feels wrong. It feels like the climaxes are happening in the wrong places. The action beats are happening, and then they sort of move into very dull, where nothing is happening. So that sense of buildup is totally gone at certain spots. There's some, just as things start to heat up, it slows down again. And I mean, my best example is, the big breakout when, I like the idea. This is sort of a familiar Stallone trope. He goes in to try to rescue Troutman. Things go wrong. It's the unsuccessful thing. It's kind of like the scene in Rocky. There's always one fight. He gets knocked down. He has to go back and fight again. Okay, good stuff. Then they go back and they do the big, we got him out. And while we're at it, let's rescue all these other people.
Right.
Again, a familiar trope. But in Rambo 2, it happened at the end. That was the big climax. Here, it's wedged in the middle. And then after that big, the music erupts, yada, yada, everything's great. Then the helicopter goes down. They crash land. And now it's dead silence again. And then when the people say, we know where to go, we'll take it from here, thank you, goodbye. And
I almost laughed out loud when that happened.
And then the two just sort of walk off in the other direction. And I'm like, wait, what? Hang on, wait. If you know where to go to find safety, why are these two guys going somewhere else? Like, that made no sense to me. But again, that's the story they're trying to do. If they don't want Rambo and Troutman kind of schlepping through the desert, dragging these people behind them the whole time, they want.
Why not? Why not make it a human story the way that it's supposed to be? There's supposed to be a human element, and the problem is that there's no human element in Rambo 3.
Right. Meaning, right. So. Right, but we still have 45 minutes of action beats to hit. I can't do it while I'm dragging these people along, so he leaves them there. They go off and do their thing. Right, doesn't make a lot of sense. Had this big rescue happened at the end of the film, I know you can't just redo Rambo 2, but again, to do the big rescue here doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah, so it's just structurally doesn't work.
You know what else didn't make a lot of sense for me? They had that big lineup at the end with the with all of the remaining Soviets, lining up near the border and everything like that. And the dude offers him the chance to surrender. That didn't feel right at all. Well, it's like, oh, this one guy came in, blew up my base, beat the shit out of most of my guys, killed a bunch of my people, but I'm going to give you a chance to surrender. And, we're going to give you a trial.
Well, I think the point of that was, and Troutman said it, he goes, somehow I don't believe him. Yeah, I think they're just trying to take them back alive is all that is. They're going to torture the shit out of them if they get them back home. But
for what purpose? They were starting to try to torture Troutman. Troutman would be the bigger, information grab than anything else. What are they going to get out of Rambo? Rambo's just, he's a thug.
I just think it's because the Russian guy's a meanie head is all. I don't think that really... He wants to take him back to beat up on him and torture him and whatever and have his fun, I suppose. That's all I read into that.
I feel bad for the actor who played the heavy Russian in this one, because I mentioned in the last episode how the guy who played Podofsky, it's a two-dimensional character, but the way the actor played it just was so delicious that you kind of forgave the fact that he was a two-dimensional character.
Yeah.
Here, this poor guy is stuck with, I'm the bad guy, and he's not really doing anything to it to give the slightest bit of depth. like, at least in some respects with Podolsky, it's kind of like, oh, well, he's doing what he's doing. And this other guy's like, no, this guy's just a dick. And it really didn't even feel satisfying when he died at the end.
Yes, I agree. This guy, he's doing what he can with what he's got, but yeah, it's a very even early in the film, like when they find Rambo in the monastery, Troutman shows up with what's his face, and again the quintessential jerk,
Kurtwood Smith. You give props to Red Foreman of that '70s show.
Yeah, I mean, a great actor again. But like once you see him, he's gonna be a jerk, which he really isn't in this. He's just kind of like doing what he's got to do. But anyway, like when he starts giving the exposition, Rambo, I don't know what you know about Afghanistan, but yada 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 yada. And then he says, as soon as he says, except for one region, because the general there is particularly brutal, it's like, oh, bad guy. There's the bad guy. Now we're talking about the bad guy who will be the bad guy throughout the whole film. So you're telegraphing way ahead of the game. Typical, we just need a villain. We need a villain here. And then, of course, you get his henchman, Bluto,
That's accurate.
I mean, just watching the two of them fight is like, it's like watching Popeye and Bluto. And it's he's another very, very typical. Again, doesn't speak, big guy, meanie head. And again, it is weird because honestly, there are some things that should have worked. When they do that, they do the thing where they fight when they go into the cave. I remember thinking, like, I didn't really understand that whole scene. Like, why? I get what it is, because it's, it's a decent action scene. Rambo can do his thing in there. But it was so awkward, because, like, who would hide in that cave? You're cornering yourself. You're totally cornering yourself. It's not like, I think it was kind of meant to be sort of a callback, sort of, to when he's stuck in the cave in First Blood, but there he was trapped in the cave. Here he goes in voluntarily. All the Russians got to do is put a big old cork over that hole. Done. Let's go home. Very stupid. But then when they do
drop napalm or something like that.
Yeah, just fill it with cement. Or, you don't even have to get that creative. But when he comes out and the bad guy now he's there and his face is kind of busted up because he got stuck in the explosion. Good, decent, and I even like the fight. I like the idea of the fight that, Rambo is kind of getting his ass whooped, and he pulls the pin on the grenade. Yeah. And I thought, now that's pretty interesting because, again, it's not just a matter of Rambo beats the guy up. Like in Rambo 2, when he's fighting the bad guy in the helicopter, really, Rambo just, again, Rambo's pretty over. He can't, the guy is clearly outmatching him rather. But Rambo eventually just finds a way to kick his rear end and get him kicked off the helicopter. Here, he kind of uses a moment of ingenuity instead of just brute force. I thought it was decent. But again, and it should have been a great moment. The guy falls into the hole, just as his neck snaps, boom, he explodes. It should have been that moment where your arms are up in the air, yeah, but somehow it's not. It just doesn't feel satisfying.
I'm not sure where to even put the fault on that one. Script, editing, directing, because it's actually relatively tightly edited. I thought that there were some really good editing choices that they made in this movie, so I'm not sure I'm ready to blame that. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's Rambo fatigue? It's hard to say. By the way, I want to point out real quick, it's not Omar Sharif. The actor who plays the head of the Mujahideen is Spiros Fokas. He kind of looks a lot like Omar Sharif, but it's not him. Trust me, I checked the credits.
What about the guy, like not the guy who leads him in, but the guy who's there?
No, that's who I'm talking about. That's exactly who I'm talking about.
Really?
His name is Spiros Fokas. Yep. If you look him up on IMDb, you're like, holy smokes, he kind of does look like Omar Sharif.
Oh, I totally thought that they had him in there for. Oh, that's weird. That's funny. I never put two and two together. I thought for sure that was him.
Nope, he's a Greek actor. He's been in a bunch of old Zorro movies. He's been in a bunch of Vincent Minnelli movies back in the 60s. He was in The Jewel of the Nile as Omar, the guy who was trying to, become a... Yeah, that's him.
I thought the guy from The Jewel of the Nile, I thought that was Omar Sharif. That's so funny. I totally thought that was like, the way to get some gravitas. Like he's like, the Marlon Brando of these films. Like, let's try to get him in to give it a little gravitas. So that's funny. I had no idea that was a different guy.
My feeling is they probably wanted Omar Sharif and he probably turned it down. That's my feeling.
Or they couldn't afford him.
It is very much an Omar Sharif type role, so I can completely see your mistake. And to be honest with you, until I looked at IMDb, I was with you on like, oh yeah, Omar Sharif. It had to be Omar Sharif. Looked exactly like them. No, nope, not him.
Oh, that's funny.
I guess we're racists.
Maybe. Yeah. Well. So, you mentioned Rambo fatigue. I also think the Stallone fatigue is a thing in this film. There's so many.
This is him at the height of his ego.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. First of all, okay, costume commander time. I appreciate that Rambo has long hair. I don't like it when it's long enough that it's covering his ears, and frankly, he looks like Cher. So I was not a fan of that, but there are so many. I mean, I remember even when the reviews came out of this film, like every critic would say something about how there are just so many self-adoring close-ups in this film. It's really just this kind of Stallone vehicle. It's like every shot is like, okay, I get it, Stallone, you're a handsome man. I don't need constant close-ups. I get it that you're built and in great shape. But I mean, he's with these people who live in the desert, and here's Rambo, who has to have like a tank top and nothing else. Of course, the end of the film, he has to have no shirt on because he's Rambo. Because it's easier just to rip the shirt off than to actually take it off, etc. Or to, I don't know. I mean, it just felt like, there's a lot of times in this where I feel like I'm just sort of watching Stallone do this self-aggrandizing, hey, look at me film. And it's distracting. It is very distracting. There are moments, there's a moment where he's sneaking into the base the first time around. He goes through the minefield, and at one point he slips under a tank, and he just sort of rides the tank in. And I'm thinking, and that's a pretty good idea. It's a pretty good shot. But as you're watching it, you're saying to yourself, I feel like I'm only watching this to see Stallone's biceps. Like, I get it. All right, I get it. You worked out. You put in the time. So, it's good on you. But again, this whole movie is like these little weird close-ups and stuff. It's like, all right, dude. So there's that. That is definitely part of it, I think.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how much was directed by Peter McDonald and how much was actually directed by Stallone.
It was, I guess George P. Cosmatos was busy, so you got another guy to just sort of, but again, it is oddly frustrating because there are so many things that do work. I mean, they put some time in to do a decent score. The photography is very good. There's a lot of stuff that actually does work. And by the way, another pet peeve of mine, when sequels reuse the score from the film prior. Mm-hmm. Boy, does that bug me. That really, really bugs me because it's your mind, especially if you're a geek like me who had the soundtrack, who listened to it ad nauseum, who saw the movie, the last movie, more times than, I could recite every line from the movie. So now when I'm watching the sequel and I hear the same music cues, it's almost like your brain is kind of, it's like the moment where... Okay, just because I know you love my bizarre analogies, the moment in Octopussy where Bond's car goes over the spikes and he's got flat tires and he turns onto the train tracks and the car rides on the train tracks.
Yeah,
When I hear a familiar score, my brain is kind of starting to do that. It's almost like part of my brain just got on the track and now I'm sort of on with something else. Like I know this music so well that I know that something is going to happen in about 3 seconds because the peak in the score comes up, or there's going to be a dip in 30 seconds because I know the piece of music. So it's almost like it breaks my enjoyment of an action scene because half of my brain kind of knows something is coming. It's like my brain is trying to piece together now what's about to happen based on this very familiar piece of music. Very irritating. And again, if you want to, I mean, at least have the composer. It doesn't have to be a brand new. If you want to ape what you did before, but do it again. Do it so like change the instrumentation a little bit. Do something different so that I see you're playing familiar themes, but just not reusing actual tracks. It's so irritating for me.
I feel you on that, man. I feel like this was a phone-in from Jerry Goldsmith as opposed to the last couple of movies. There wasn't really anything that, I mean, we praised the soundtrack of First Blood, and we praised the soundtrack of Rambo First Blood Part 2. But here, it was very, I don't want to say static, but very paint by numbers. It just felt like he didn't have any passion for it.
Well, I mean, the new stuff he does do is really good. Like, for example, the great scene in the beginning, the stick fighting scene. I mean, that to me was a great opening for a Rambo movie. That was a great idea, great opening, fun scene. I love watching that one. And the music there works. It works perfectly fine when they go into Afghanistan. And I even like the stuff when Rambo like just literally shows up in Afghanistan. He's sort of walking through kind of a bustling street, and you kind of get a tiny flavor of where you are. The music there is fine, and then of course the journey into the desert is great. All that's fine. It's just when the action cues kick in that they literally just pull out the old cassette of Rambo First Blood Part 2 and start playing tracks of the last one. That's the part that kills me. So again, if he's there to work, put him to work. I feel like it's just like in the editing room where they say, you know what, those scenes are so great, we need to do that again. Let's get the music, and that'll put everybody's mind back in that. Yeah, true, but yeah, again, if the story structure, if the build up is not right, don't ape that old music.
You know, people can learn from John Williams. John Williams has a way of playing with themes and making original cuts for his music. You take Star Wars, for example. Each character in the original Star Wars trilogy had their own kind of like theme, and he would like definitely blend them when he used it for action scenes or for fighting scenes and so on and so forth. That's a talented. I mean, granted, you know, as much as I love Jerry Goldsmith, like John Williams is like definitely another level when it comes to music composition. There is ways to make it work, and it just didn't work here. You can make your action cues work. You can rework them and make them work. For just whatever reason, he didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very frustrating, frankly. And again, like I said, it almost contributes to what we were saying earlier about how the structure is so incorrect that the peaks and valleys of this film, again, these breakout music scores, and then you go into this kind of lull, you know, dull. Well, we're just kind of. I mean, it's seriously, they're literally kind of like just wandering through the desert. I mean, they do. I guess it's like the last big fight with Bluto. And then, you know, that's all done. And that's, again, for something that is supposed to be one of your bigger set pieces, it's not that exciting. Like, I mean, honestly, like Rambo fought the other, you know, big baddie guy in the helicopter in the last one. Here, they're just fighting on the ground, and the urgency is not quite there. So, yeah, it's almost like, but then once that is done, then you see Rambo and Troutman just, you know, wandering through the desert again, and it's like again, all that tension and buildup is just kind of done, and then you have to wait for it to sort of kick back up again, and then you get the cavalry and stuff. I mean, seriously, like the moment where he goes, like I love it when Troutman says, "We did it, John." Like you're like, okay, like now, like the second you say that, you know that the bad guys are gonna turn the corner any second. So, and the finale, too, is weird because you would think that would be a really great way to cap off the film. You would think that I mean, here, again, the big cavalry comes, big action scene. And again, you should be feeling like, yay, these are the guys who we met before. They came to rescue us. And normally that's a great moment. You know, I mean, when you have, the characters you got to know early on, and then you've been alone for a while, and then the end, those familiar characters reappear to rescue you. That's great. That usually works great, but for some reason here, it kind of falls flat. And again, I genuinely can't put my finger on it because they tried to spend some time with these people. Like, again, Rambo shows up at the, where the Mujahideen people are living. He sees the terrible things that they've had to endure. He sees the hospital. Everybody's all beat up and broken. He plays football with them, or whatever you call that thing, and that's
with the goat, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was a semi-interesting scene for a couple reasons. I like the idea that, again, it was almost like seeing Rambo in a moment of leisure, which you never get. Like, it's funny because whenever I talk about James Bond films lately, I'm always sort of complaining that we never see James Bond in a moment of leisure anymore. It's always mission, mission, mission. You never get to see him play golf or ski or just play cards just for the fun of it, because you want to get to know the character. You want to see how this character lives, what motivates them, and seeing them in downtime as part of that. And I thought this was like probably the only time you saw Rambo sort of take like a breather and do something just for the fun of something and just trying to get to know the people, etc. I thought pretty good. Then you got the big helicopter attack. They ruin the whole thing. They show up, they're shooting everybody up. You see people dying everywhere. You would think that we've gotten to know these people enough to feel that once they show up at the end, you should have that kind of like, yay, that good sense of camaraderie and that swell of, yet it's not there. And I maybe part of that is that even though we saw a lot of faces and we heard people speak, the only two that we sort of get to know is I guess the guy's name is Musa, the guy who, takes him in, and then the kid. You have like the short round of the Rambo franchise to show up and, and these are the two that we sort of focused on. And they maybe that's part of it, is that even though we saw all these people, that those are the only two we kind of got to know a little bit more. But I guess that's probably, it goes back to the idea that this film is not about anyone else but Rambo. It's all about Rambo, so we never get a chance to appreciate or get to know anyone else. And that's why we don't feel much. In fact, like in the beginning, for example, when, again, we see Rambo, we see the stick fighting thing. He's back at the, living with the monks, etc. And then Troutman shows up and they talk great length about what's going on. And then there's this whole discussion. Rambo, we didn't make you this fighting machine. We just chipped away the rough edges, and everything there is kind of going fine. In fact, up until this point, I'm enjoying the film very much. Yeah, I really do like this, and the score is good. Again, they're bringing back some of that classic First Blood stuff. Everything's fine. Then they cut to Rambo supposedly in Afghanistan. He's there for 30 whole seconds before a helicopter shows up and he's captured. And it's like you feel
You mean Troutman.
What did I say?
You mean Troutman.
Yes.
You said Rambo.
Sorry.
But just making sure that I was following where you were going. Go on.
So Troutman is in Afghanistan for all of 30 seconds before the helicopters come and they're all captured. And you really do get this sense of like, we're just showing you just enough to get this thing moving. Let's get the show on the road. And then they cut back to Rambo back at the monastery looking like literally this was 10 minutes after they shot the last part. Again, like there's no sense of time. Again, Troutman just left, which I guess was Thailand, to go to Afghanistan. How long is that plane ride? Like do you think Troutman has to land, has to get his gear, has to get set up, get with his people, go on this mission? You'd think some time had elapsed, but it doesn't feel it at all. It just feels like, here we go. Here he is. He's there for a second. He's captured. Now we can get back to Rambo. Let's hurry up and get back to Rambo. Let's get back to Rambo in his belly shirt, putting the wheel on something. So yeah, I think that's actually sort of the core 80s. Of the problem. Yeah, well, that's it. Again, the film doesn't want us to notice anyone else, so we don't take any joy in these people when they get rescued. We don't take any joy in the fact that they come to help and aid Rambo, and so yeah, I guess that could be a big part of it. I guess you're not feeling anything from the film because it's all focused on Rambo.
Just going to let you know that from Afghanistan to Thailand is 5,327 miles. Weirdly, when I looked it up, it gave me driving directions and says it will take me 3 days and 19 hours to get there. So I suppose.
How many days walk? About 2 years. And by the way, can I mention the goofy attempts at humor in this film?
You mean the very 80s goofy attempts at humor in this movie? Well done.
How do you feel? Well done. Seriously, I mean that's again, it's funny because I guess there was some like around that time I can recall people saying how there's no humor in these films, et cetera, so he tried to just shoehorn a couple things in there. Yeah, doesn't really work.
Okay, so in an episode of The Critic, when they showed a clip of a movie of Arnold Schwarzenegger as a rabbi.
Rabbi P.I. It's the story of a Chicago cop who goes undercover as a Hasidic Jew.
Eat lead, Rabbi.
Sorry, that's not kosher.
All right. If you are a real rabbi, circumcise this child.
Have a nagila, baby.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking as I'm watching it. It is very, very difficult to let stuff like that go. It was just corny. I mean, and even more so, it reminded me of Schwarzenegger's little one-liners from Commando. And that's kind of not what you want Rambo to be compared to. Commando was tongue-in-cheek from the start, so it kind of got away from it there. Here, it detracts from the Rambo character. It makes him... Is he a tortured character? Is he a person who's, trying to get past all these things that have happened in his life? This is the character that we've, been told about for the past two movies. And now here he is, and all of a sudden he's like, a jokey little guy, and you want to say, okay, well, that's him... That's, from living with the monks, he's learned to lighten up, and you want to say that, but it doesn't really feel earned. Especially when, the switch gets hit after the big attack on the village, and he's like, "No, I'm fighting for you," or whatever the line was, or something like that. It's like that. That should be the end of Zen Rambo. And, back to, fighting Rambo, focused, doesn't get distracted, so on and so forth. These are all the things that, he talks about, that Troutman talks about in all the movies.
Yeah.
And it felt out of place. It absolutely, positively felt out of place.
Yeah. It's right. I mean, it's you see the film trying to just become, it's the meeting of the writers of Rambo 3. What is this? It's an 80s action film. That's it. Right. And any of that sort of realism and character study of First Blood is long gone here, and we're trying to just write him in terms of one-liners. I mean, seriously, the part when right at the end, and then all of a sudden the big Russian army shows up, and Rambo goes, "Surrounding them's out," and even Troutman goes, "It's a hell of a time for humor, John." It was just so cringy and stupid. It's like, just stop talking. And then, like you said, the frustration is then, what now? And there's this close up on Stallone again, cocking the gun, chun chun, and the music kicks in. It says something like, "What do we do now?" And he goes, "F him," and shoots the grenade. And it's like, come on! 1 second ago, he cracks a joke. Now he's got that face, dun dun, this deadly serious face, and starts shooting, and it's like come on, either figure out what you're doing here. If you're going to be lighthearted and funny, do it. If you're going to be dead serious, and now I'm serious, more serious than ever, do that. You can't, not in one breath, he changes his whole demeanor. And it's like, again, because we're trying to be everything to everyone. See, this is a film that's trying to please everyone, I think. And that's kind of what's wrong with it. There's no consistent tone throughout that carries through.
He's a soldier who never strikes first. He's a warrior who wasn't going to take on one more war.
What do you think this man is?
God!
Oh, God would have mercy. He won't.
All right, well, Well, let's score this sucker, because we are there. Mr. Rambo, you go first.
Again, this, like I said, this is a weird one because on one hand, it's hardly a bad movie. I mean, I feel like if you're there for reasonably decent action spectacle, if you want the one-man army idea, if you liked Rambo 2, you should like Rambo 3. But just keep your expectations in check. It's not going to work nearly as well as it did in the last one. So again, I in that respect, I find it a struggle to rank this film. Part of me says it's a 5 because I kind of feel like it sort of leaves you so flat and empty that it's just right on the cusp of being worth watching. Part of me wants to give it as high as an 8 possibly and say, yeah, but it's got respectable action. It's got fun. It's got this. Yeah. So I think I'm going to settle on a 6, to be honest with you. I probably can't even really go for 7 because there's just too much about it that doesn't quite work. It's one of those, it's too, for a film like this, it shouldn't feel that forgettable and disposable. You know, it's like you watch it once. I mean, again, I just watched it yesterday. It's a good looking film. It's shot well. All of the action, most of the action is good. When they're in action scenes, they work. Some of the editing could be tightened up a little bit, I think, to try to pick up that pace a little. But yeah, again, and it's that story structure. It's that action scene, nothing. Action scene, nothing. Action scene, nothing. So it's so hard to kind of keep that adrenaline going. It's like the second you're right about to get a pump, it goes away, and then then you start again later. It's not. So I guess a 6 is fair, even though that might be a little harsh. But again, yeah, it's worth checking out, but don't expect a lot.
If you don't have anything in between the action sequences, the action sequences become empty. Even if they're well done. And the action sequences in this movie are very well done, I felt the attack on the village, it was impressive. And I'll get to that in a little bit. But it's too hollow. And at least with the previous Rambo films, there was a soul to them that made you root for Rambo. I didn't have really anybody to root for in this movie. You know, I just knew that Troutman was going to make it out. Even the minute he got captured, I was like, well, he's going to make it out. Rambo will figure it out, blah, blah, blah. There was nothing in here that left me feeling like I couldn't predict what was going to happen next. And I suppose that is a trope for the Rambo movies and, you know, for 80s action movies at the time. But after First Blood Part 2, I was kind of hoping for maybe something better, something different. It didn't gel. It's as simple as that. You had the ingredients, you had the right ingredients, but it's missing that one thing that makes it all gel and gives you a nice thing of Jell-O. Okay? All you've got now is liquid. It's tasty liquid, but it's still liquid. It's not the Jell-O that you were expecting. I gave the movie a 5 because I still feel it's a worthy movie. It's definitely one you should check out, but check your expectations. You know, don't look for high art or anything like that, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to see some great, visual effects at work, but other than that,
All right, I'm with you.
All right, how about Who Asked You?
Who asked me? I am going to have to go with the aforementioned recycling of the music from the last one. Again, I almost feel like it doesn't allow this film to live up to its own potential. There are action scenes that on their own could have worked a lot better had you not made that mistake. Again, it's a weird thing with me. It really bugs me. Spectre did that. It recycled a lot of the music from Skyfall. And when you do that, it's just so weirdly distracting. And again, it makes you start to anticipate action moments or slow moments because the music is familiar. It's not good. It's not good when they do that. The exception might be, the first bunch of James Bond films, an action scene would play, and then that very familiar dun 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 dun. But it's different because that was just sort of background music, and you could sort of just allow it to play in the background as things were happening on screen. Here you're talking about specific peaks and valleys, highs and lows in the music, and if your brain is anticipating things, it's like my brain locks in and I start to anticipate what's coming. So, yeah, bad move. I wish they didn't do that.
I'll agree with you on that, man. Especially when we've had better examples of somebody who knows how to deftly work a theme and work music into a movie. For me, it's the quips. I didn't laugh at any of Rambo's quips. I felt they were out of place and out of character. I understand they were trying to lighten it up, but for God's sakes, you had two sidekicks. Couldn't they have been the ones with the quips? Why couldn't they have been the ones with the quips? That's the way it should have worked. People complain a lot about the quips that get used in like the Marvel movies, and I was always like, what are you talking about? I kind of felt like, they were organic. They came from characters that seemed to. I mean, people like, the scene in Endgame where Rhodey says, "What's up, regular sized man?" It's like, what's wrong with that?
Yeah,
that's a funny moment.
Yeah. Yeah, very true.
But those characters earned it. I don't feel like Rambo is at a point where he can be that blasé and quippy about, murder and death and war and shit like that.
Right, exactly. Pick a tone and stick with it. I remember when this movie came out, for the longest time I had friends who kept on harping on what is this? It's a blue light. What does it do? Turns blue. Like it turns blue. Like, this is the funniest thing. I'm like, oh, this turns blue. Yeah, you're right. Exactly. It breaks the whole. It's again, you have to pick a tone and stick with it. You can't sprinkle in. Look at Justice League. You can't just sort of take something that's already done, sprinkle in light-hearted moments, and think you're going to hit that perfect balance. No, it doesn't work that way. It's got to be. It's if it's not in the fiber of your story, then just leave it out.
I also want to point out, since you mentioned it, the little blue, it turns blue joke.
Yeah.
Okay. This made me feel like, ooh, well, what's the interesting thing that they're going to use with these things? They made this whole big deal to point it out and make a joke about it. Obviously, it's going to have some huge momentous thing. I don't feel the payoff of him attaching it to one of his bows and using it to distract the Soviets to kill another guy is that big payoff. I don't feel like they kind of did a setup, but no payoff for the stupid blue lights.
Yeah, totally, yes. Well, again, that whole scene down there, they're kind of doing, a lot of that stuff doesn't work. They're trying to do that Rambo tropey, guerrilla warfare, hiding out and trapping people, and it didn't really work there. And by the way, we got the return of the explosive arrows. The fact that tiny little tip can explode a helicopter. I mean, at that point, I'm just like, boy, really? Like, if that was the case, I think people would be going into modern day battlefields with bows and arrows if that thing could really have that kind of a punch.
Well, I'm sure if they would have shown the arrow actually maybe either hit where the missiles were or the gas tank, it would have been a tad more believable. But, yeah, no, it didn't. It was just like, boom. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, something that should have been great. I remember watching that in the theater thinking, like that should have been a great moment, and the build-up is even pretty good because they show him kind of cutting back to him setting the arrow up and putting the thing together. I mean, again, it's a well-crafted moment, but, again, doesn't just kind of leaves me flat for some reason.
What about for your consideration, sir?
I have a hunch we're gonna kind of say the same thing, but
I know I have two, and I know the one that I have you are not going to use, but go on.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go with, first of all, there's a lot of really good moments in the film, which, again, it's a shame that it doesn't really sort of come together the way it should. The opening stick fight, really good. I mean, that's I still love watching that today. But I'm going to give it to the part where they're playing the football game and they're cutting back to shots of the helicopter coming in. And I thought, now that was a really well done thing. The score is really good there. I love what it's doing. That sort of that buildup of tension. You know, again, everyone's kind of just relaxing and playing a game while impending danger is coming. So yes, that sense of dread starts to swell up. Now the payoff is not great. I kind of find that once the helicopters start firing, the action that follows, just again kind of bland and whatever. Just Rambo getting to a machine gun and shooting one of the helicopters and blowing it up, just okay. And again, just from bullets, the helicopter explodes. But anyway, the attempt there is good. That what they're doing there works really well. The score is really good, and I kind of wish we had more of that.
I will give you that. And actually, it's funny. It's not exactly what is my for your consideration, but it's close. But I'll get to that first, because the first thing I have to mention for my consideration, I just got to say it, Taiwanese Mickey.
Taiwanese Mickey.
Oh, you missed it! The little guy with Mickey's hat with the cigar that gave him his money at the end of the fight. I was giggling when I saw him.
That, you know what? I know exactly who you're talking about, and I never thought of that before. But you know what? There you go. It's pretty much the same hat. You're right.
I was giggling. I really was. And it wasn't a bad giggle. It wasn't a derisive giggle. And there's no way in hell you're telling me that wasn't intentional. I found that little thing charming. I did. But honestly, for me, I'm going to go with the stunt work and the practical effects. With the exception of when the helicopter and the tank actually hit each other, like when they actually collided, those were obviously models. But everything else was practical. The helicopter flying low, that was practical. Stallone, on a horse holding a frickin' Molotov cocktail while an explosion's behind him, that was a practical effect. I loved that.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved that. I loved the scene. I mean, even though the action wound up being empty, I am going to give all credit in the world to the stunt and to the practical effects guys for at least trying and making it look really, really good and visceral. I really, really appreciated that. And every time, everything happened practically, I was so pleased. So pleased. I miss practical stunts, practical effects like nobody's business.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And again, it's interesting because that's one of the things I sort of can't get my head around exactly. Like the action scenes in this film, I don't know what it is about them that's kind of just shy of working. It's almost like when I watch this film and I see the action beats going on, it's almost like I can tell, or I have a consciousness of the idea that when he's running here, someone yells cut, they take a breather, they collect themselves, they go back. Now they shoot the scene where he runs over here and goes up against the wall. Then they cut, and then he looks back and forth, and then he goes to the next spot. And there's something in it. Again, I can't tell if the editing is just not tight enough or if the camera is not always in the right spot. Like when he gets off his horse in that scene when the helicopter's coming, he gets off the horse and he runs up against the wall. And just as he hits the wall, there's an explosion that goes off behind him and nearly kills the horse in the process. But I don't know. There's something about that feels so static and kind of clunky. And I can't put my finger on it. And even stuff like when he's firing at the helicopter's flying towards him. And then at the moment it explodes, it's very obvious that the helicopter was not moving. That it was it cut to a still of this thing sitting there and then they blow it up. And I'm saying to myself, if the camera was in a different place, like if it was maybe like looking at the helicopter head on, it wouldn't have been quite so obvious that it wasn't moving. So little things like that, again, it's like there's tiny little errors in here that add up to a bigger problem. And that's part of it. But I do agree with you that the fact that they're all doing this stuff, I mean, I'm sure Stallone does probably 90% of his own stunts in this film. I mean, you're constantly hearing about how he got injured and stuff. So, and plus he's just that much of an ego hound that he'd want to do it all himself. By the way, there's a part when they break Troutman out and they take over the helicopter, and there's a guy sitting in the pilot's seat, and Rambo, puts a rifle butt to his head, knocks him out. When the guy turns around, it's so funny. I say to myself, I know I'm watching too many movies when I recognize all of the stunt people by name. I'm 90% sure that's the guy who jumped off the roof in Lethal Weapon.
Oh, maybe. And thus ends Rambo 3. But the Rambo show continues with just plain old Rambo. It takes place 20 years after this movie.
Kind of hard to believe, isn't it? But yeah, Rambo's going to come back. And that means we're getting close to Rambo Last Blood. And I'm just very curious to see how I end up feeling about that one.
I'm looking forward to Rambo because you liked it. I've never seen it, so this is gonna be neat for me. And and I'm only partially excited about the new Rambo.
Yeah.
But Stallone has worked his magic before, so who knows? We'll have to see.
Yeah, I will say before you watch Rambo, temper your expectations a little bit. There's a lot they get right tonally that I like, and there's again you'll see.
All right, I look forward to it, man. Thanks, dude. Awesome
Anytime,
show.
brother.
I think we hit most of the points that we wanted to hit.
Yeah, I would say so.
Cool. I'm glad about that then. Then until next time, sir.
Have a good one, my friend. See you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Reviews Without Remorse podcast with Joe and Dave. Join us here every Thursday for a new episode, and be sure to check out the Reviews Without Remorse channel on YouTube for spoiler-free reviews of new releases. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider becoming a Patreon. You can find our page on patreon.com/reviewswithoutremorse, one word. As little as $1 a month goes a long way. All clips in this podcast are for commentary and critique and is considered fair use. No copyright infringement is intended.
We could watch the Sylvester Stallone porn, The Italian Stallion, the story of two young lovers beefing in a gross motel.
Hey, Kitty, you want to hop on this stallion or what?
Sure, but I only ride bareback.
Oh, yeah, great. Oh, yeah. Oh, this is great. You're great.
Oh, is it great?
Oh, that's great. Hey, Kitty, you got to do one thing for me.
What?
Stroke the shaft, cup the balls.
Whoa.
Adrian!